Hi, I'm Ralph Demetrius. I'm one of the astrologers for the Planetary calendar along with Lonnie Demetrius, and this is another part of our Chinese New Year forecast for the year of the wood snake. And this is the one related to the Americas. If you didn't see our strategizing one, make sure you watch that because it's going to be very helpful. After this will be the one on Europe and another one on Asia. What's happening in the Americas this year? Guess what? The United States is not the headliner this year. We have been the headliners in previous years. This ain't it. We're not the headliners. This year, all the major planets in terms of at the Chinese New Year being in the sky, they're someplace else. Most of them are over Europe. Some are over Asia. Over the United States, the skies are almost clear. Now, that doesn't mean we're in the clear. Why? Because there's lines above and there's lines below. And underneath, pulling from the Earth, are Jupiter and Uranus. What that means is when you have what are called planets of the icy, it means they ground you. Like for instance, if you move to a place where you have the moon or the sun icy, you get there, it's like you're magnetically attached to the place because you feel home there, because these icy lines are about home. And so in the United States, we're going to have a very strong sense of feeling at home and being very focused on our own country. Americans are not going to be real interested in what's happening out there in the world, okay? Now, part of this is going to be a good number of people remember the last time Trump was in office as being very chaotic. And so there's going to be a big push for people to say, I don't want to know about it. I'm going to attend to my stuff, to my family, to my work, and I'm just kind of block that out, okay? And they have a good reason for that, because the two big lines that are here are Jupiter in Gemini. Trump, actually, and Pence were both born in Gemini, and that's Jupiter in Gemini is a retrograde, which means coming back line runs along the East Coast, off the coast of Washington, D.C., and then just inland, up along where the Mississippi is, going right up through New Orleans all the way up to Chicago, is the Uranus in Taurus line. And the hallmark of Uranus in Taurus has been climate change. Ever since Uranus in Taurus has been in Taurus, we have had massive climate change issues. And any place where Uranus shows up that year, overhead or from the IC, is in for it. Well, this year it runs right up through the Mississippi River. So you have to figure that there's a very good chance they're going to have big issues. Having Jupiter off the coast, equally bad. It's Jupiter in Gemini, air, wind, electricity, fire, electrical issues off the coast, and close enough to Uranus, because Jupiter has a big field. Jupiter, is very influential. It's a big planet. It's going to ramp up Uranus energy, and Uranus energy is chaotic. So you have to figure that between the East Coast all the way over into the Mississippi Valley, there's going to be a lot of climatic issues. There's also going to be a lot of political issues. There's going to be a lot of chaos going on. When we look at the charts for the East Coast, all the planets are up at the rising. It's tons of stuff in Aquarius, tons of stuff in Pisces, which means all like groups and governments, and Mars, which is in the sign of the Crab, retrograde, is very frustrating. It's going to be a very frustrating year in many ways, but especially in the East Coast, especially in the Northeast, because that's the spot where Jupiter almost hits landfall, is all the way up in the Northeast. So the East Coast, Washington, D.C. is going to be very, very chaotic. It's going to be like a big marketplace. It's going to like everyone went to the carnival or everyone went to town on Saturday to buy things. The whole thing is going to really feel like a marketplace. There's going to be a lot of wheeling and dealing. Okay. What's funny is a lot of it is going to be run from the West Coast, from the big companies there, because of the 50 states, the state that has the most number of Fortune 500 companies is California, and the largest number of them are in the Bay Area, which is incidentally Kamala Harris's neighborhood. And so they're going to have a lot of influence over what's happening in Washington, but it's going to be very chaotic. And like I said, the real big issue that we're worried about are these climatic changes. Big hurricanes. We've had a number of really big hurricane seasons in recent years. And having Jupiter off the coast and Uranus there really kicks it up into high gear. So if you do live in that area, please prepare well. Also, because of the way they're positioned, we'll run into the western coast of South America. Okay, Mexico doesn't have a lot of issues, though around the Yucatan they could get hit pretty badly, but it's the western coast of South America that will suffer from a lot of these same types of issues. Where the eastern coast, Brazil and such, they're not in line for it. They'll actually have a little more stability this year. In the west part of the United States, starting from probably from Kansas west, is very quiet. There's almost nothing overhead. There are two bodies that are overhead, and this is interesting. It's Vesta, the asteroid, and Juno. Now, Vesta has a lot to do with workers' rights. It has to do with women's rights, but it has a lot to do with the workers' rights. So workers' rights are going to be a real big issue, and they're both in the sign of the eagle, aka Scorpio. So a lot of stuff about the power of workers is going to be a real big issue. And it's Juno, the wife, and has a lot to do with reproductive rights. So the issue of reproductive rights, especially in the sign of Scorpio or the eagle, is the feminine sign of Mars, is going to be very powerful this year. And what's interesting, because there's no other major planets overhead, there's no competing voices. No one's coming back and saying, no, women shouldn't have this right. No, you're not going to hear it. Especially because of what happened in the election recently. You have a lot of people on the other side who are saying, no, we have to speak up about these issues. It's going to get a little overwhelming between workers' rights and reproductive rights. It's going to get very prominent this year. The power of women is going to be very evident this year. But like I said, once you get out to the West Coast, you get to the Midwest and the West Coast, it's very calm. There's not a lot going on. In California, we have one major line that goes up, which is a Pallas Athena line, which relates to attorneys. And when we look at the chart in California and the West Coast, the one thing you do see there is a lot of legal cases. A lot of legal cases. In the chart, it has Jupiter in Gemini in the 7th house. That's classic. That's the courts. Going back to the courts because it's retrograde. The Sun and Moon are in the 3rd house, which has a lot to do with attorneys and advocates. And like I said, Pallas Athena running through the coast. So this is very similar to the last time Trump was in office, when they would do things that, this is a tradition actually with California. Anytime Washington does something that California doesn't like, they take them to court. And then they keep them in court for years because California is a big state with a lot of money. So we're going to see a lot of that happening this year. So anyone who loves watching shows about law are going to be very happy this year. It's going to be a great year for them. It's going to be a great year for attorneys in the West Coast. Anyone who works as an attorney on the West Coast that has the possibility of doing these kind of cases, great billing this year. So now, very little going on in the Pacific, very quiet. But like I said, this is the real big division between a lot of chaos, a lot of climatic issues on the East Coast, and on the West Coast, much quieter. One thing that I did show up, it looks like that a lot of money on the West Coast is going to go to fire mitigation, like in other words, preventing fires. A lot of money is going to go into that, into protecting homes. It's going to be a big issue this year. But that's pretty much what's going on in the United States. Go down into the notes. You can read the detailed description about this. It's kind of interesting. It goes into things I didn't cover here because how much are you going to remember after all when you hear it? But you might remember it if you read it. So you can find your calendar at planetarycalendar.com, and wishing you a wonderful year of the wood snake.